One thing I realize about real fighting is that, barring incompetence, the person who throws the first punch usually wins. The examples would be guns. If you shoot someone first, even if they have a gun, you don't usually lose, unless you just use friends behind you with a rifle, or you miss, or just slow on the draw. Same is true for fighting. If you throw the first punch, you're probably gonna win. That's a weak punch, or a slow punch, or you don't finish him off after you knock him down. Realistically, that's all it takes. The other thing realistic is all the ways you can hit some, all times you can hit someone when they're not ready. I definitely recommend the best thing to look for when self-defense is real fighting. Records of police cases, court cases, talk to people who have been in real fights. Or if they're going for somebody who has credentials that are irrelevant to reality, but again, some martial arts experts were in real fights, but it's completely different then. It's not this, he grabs your neck, so you spin around, and that's supposed to be an easy way out. Realistically, he grabs your neck and just spin, he could choke slam you. The other thing I realized is that people who've been in real fights are much humbler than people who have this huge ego, because they almost died. They're more cautious. Realistically, it's like, those been a real fight doesn't go around saying, oh yeah, I know karate, because that makes you a target. People want to see if they can be a karate fighter. People want to shoot a karate fighter. Oh, you know karate? I know Colt 45. I've been saving that for if somebody had a gun, or if they get really desperate, we tell them, I know karate. He's like, oh, I know Colt 45. So, you're probably not going to say that. I know it's a comic book or comedy. But realistically, don't tell people you know martial arts, because they don't need to know that. And it's not going to help you. And some people will take that as an opportunity, yeah, but you're not a real killer because you have to tell me that so you don't have to do it, or you need my approval. The other argument is against martial arts. I've seen a lot of, actually the most complicated stuff is a lot of the reality-based systems that I've seen in Black Belt, when it's like somebody does a really slow punch with a club, or takes this really dead knife swing, or worse, points a gun at you. You're supposed to like block it, take it away, and then beat them up. Realistically, the best thing to do is just run or beat them up. The other bullshit, man, is like, it doesn't make your fighting look gritty if you're really sloppy. It just tells me you're not a professional. As for whether you're a professional, you don't have to be, but it certainly helps. The other thing people don't realize, that in Asia, if you say you know martial arts, it means they'll say you must be really strong, because realistically you cannot break boards with your bare hands unless you were strong as all hell. And you did be at least as strong as a boxer to be a black belt in Japan. Possibly stronger, because you also have to have strong legs and you have to go bare knuckles. But people don't believe that anymore. They have, in America, in Britain, you can have a 10-year-old black belt, but it used to be only adults could be black belts, only the best. It's not that they were weaker then. I think they were tougher back in the 60s. Standards are lower now. The other problem is people who just disregard martial arts entirely. Well, there's basic stuff. It's like, oh, crazy. What if I kick you in the stomach? That's completely different from if I kick you in the head. The other problem, of course, with talking about martial arts, whether it works or not, well, there's so many martial arts and so many apeshit instructors that don't really know what they're talking about that you should probably just ignore. The other thing is, to avoid martial arts cults that make you swear allegiance, have secret techniques that only certain people can learn. Beware of that. Like this one, really questionable one I seen on YouTube. Okichita. Apparently East Coast Indians did spin kicks. Some of the moves are pretty good that I've seen, but there's this video, and I'm pretty wary of this, where it was a documentary on the news. They were swearing people in with like smoke, a fan, looked like something out of a cult. Be careful with stuff like that, because it is a cult. And that's something to be careful about. Is this whole hyper-aggressive stuff, like, you know, the knife fighting, the stick fighting, the neck snap type moves. That most likely, you know, if you break somebody's nose or break his toe or his finger, you're done. Because most people aren't going to keep fighting after that. But also, if you take a knife and do all this type of stuff on his arms, you know, it's excessive force. You don't need to cut a human being that many times in real life to win a fight. It's just murder. Be careful with that, this whole murder style stuff. Like, most likely you were not justified in using a knife to defend yourself. In which case, you're using a knife. Before you brought a knife to a gunfight, it was a bad idea to bring a knife to a sword fight, because his machete is this long, your knife is this long, it's not much of a fight. Then you get this culture where they'd have swords, and they had bows and arrows, spears, slings, clubs that would be like these. I could find a picture I would show it of like African clubs and like Native American clubs that would basically break your hand or your arm while you're trying to poke him with a knife. Also, using a knife in self-defense, how do you know? You'd have to know that there are laws about killing someone to save your life, and also how to cut somebody to kill them to win a fight, as opposed to on his arm. Probably this one's gonna argue between the wrong, but I don't care. You know, you don't have to do that many cuts in a real knife fight. The other thing, you're not likely to get into a knife fight. Realistically, people don't challenge you to a fight with knives. And if someone's crazy to do that, run away. You have nothing to prove, nothing to protect, and he can kill you. And if he's dumb enough to do that, he's mentally ill. The other thing to realize, most criminals are mentally ill, and because of that, they're unpredictable. So, all this, if he does this, he does that, it's not going to happen. It's random acts of violence. You don't know what people are going to do. The other thing is, the huge problem is, you're not going to get into a knife fight. Most likely people are going to point a gun at you, in which case, shoot first is your best defense, realistically. Like, people I say, you want to be, yeah, I do want to be a cowboy, because that could save your life when you have an armed attacker, as opposed to playing this sort of, I don't know where people get the idea that you can actually, like, disarm people, or, like, it doesn't matter the escape moves. If he grabs your arm, you're supposed to do something with your arm. If somebody grabs your arm, hit him. You know, because you don't know how much upper body strength he has, that you can do all that, and it's easy in class, so they're supposed to let go. But, in real life, you can assume, especially for a woman or a child, that grabs your arm, you're gonna be just struggling. But you don't assume that his nose is any harder to break than anybody else's, or that he's any harder to push down, and that's much more likely to learn in a short amount of time how to wrestle somebody. As for the whole, like, they all say the same with disarms. It's like, realistically, somebody flashes a knife at you, all this stuff is not gonna work, because for one thing, if you grab a knife, you're gonna bleed. for another, he's not gonna just stop, and for another, you know how strong he is, you know how fast he is, you know what moves he can make. There are other things to do. But if you have something to prove, you might still do the whole, oh, if he does this, he does that. Well, if he does this with his knife, then what are you gonna do? He throws the knife at you. So I don't know, and I don't care, because I'm not like getting into a street fight. And it's not scripted. It's not a video game where you have programmed AI and you know what they're gonna do. It's more like LARPing. You don't know these people, maybe they're your friends, maybe you do know them, but there's not a script, and they can basically do whatever the hell they want. Except in real life, unlike LARPing, they're not gonna bop you in the head with a foam sword. They're gonna bash your head in with whatever the hell they have available that they think could realistically kill you with. The other problem with the whole, like, oh, what if he does this? Like, oh, he's not like, what if I do this and that? You're not gonna remember all these elaborate moves. Country probably karate is probably your best bet, because that's pretty simple, and there's Federation, there's the All Japan Karate Federation. You know the people are real karate people, but you don't know if people are really Israeli commandos, and if they are, I hope you're not Palestinian, because then you go to a Israeli self-defense class and you might get seriously beat up. Or, no, actually I doubt it, they're not that ignorant, but, find out people's credentials before you start talking about, oh, but he says super secret system. Well, if it's super secret, why does it matter? If it's a military system, that's the other thing. How likely are soldiers going to get into a knife fight? They have guns. Most likely, the best thing you learn from soldiers is how to shoot people, or how to avoid getting shot. The place to learn fist fighting, knife fight, all that. People have been, maybe police officers, or maybe criminals, or anyone who, maybe Indians, because they do that all the time now. But don't worry about the whole, why would the military know how to do that? They don't really care. And you realize that even short range guns can shoot someone from far enough away that you're probably never gonna have somebody charging at you and get close enough. Realistically, that doesn't happen. Even in the Middle East, they have rifles, so how likely are you gonna get into, like, a knife fight with a terrorist? You don't know. They use whatever weapon, any weapon they can get a hold of. So if he's a poor terrorist, or he's a poor shot, he might have a knife. Or maybe he's out of bullets and has a knife. Or maybe but you don't know. Unless you're an intelligence officer and you can say, yeah, this guy is a psychopath for his knives. But that's the main thing I'm going over. Don't worry about what people are going to do, because you don't know. And philosophical point on that, don't try to control other people, because you literally cannot. The thing people say is, only worry about yourself. You know, you can give people reasons to make a choice, but it's still their choice. The other point I have to make is, sometimes, you know, my mom would talk about she wouldn't want to do different fun stuff for her because Jeff can fall through. You have other options. You have other options, so have backup plans. The other thing, don't worry about other people, because you can't help them. If they want your help, maybe you can give them some advice, but leave that to the professionals. That's the main thing with self-defense too. Police should tell you where the high crime areas are, and people roving criminals, they should have wanted posters put up on the news. And the other thing, this whole vigilante thing, why don't you trust the police? We need to make the police more trustworthy. Honestly, real life is not an action movie. you don't have plot armor. And, you know, the action heroes with guns are just like you get shot as the action heroes without guns. Because most of them don't really do anything to avoid getting shot. Just like in the Patriot, where you have the redcoats and the colonists squaring off in the beginning, and they just basically wipe each other out because they didn't have any kind of plan for what would actually protect them from being shot. And that's one reason also that they're not afraid of criminals. Actually, they are afraid of criminals getting all the guns, because that's what would happen. You know, it would be guns or people gun. Only people guns. I think you can argue that the police get better guns, or the all kind of stuff. But then people use the argument that gun control cuts down crime. Well, yeah. If criminals can get a lot of guns, if you don't need a gun to defend yourself from criminals, then there's an argument that people were killing each other before guns. Is another argument. Like, okay, you start back as ancient Greece or something, people were dying all the time. However, then they'll start advancing like knives, wrenches, but arguably you can use that too, because there's no reason only people with criminal records can do that, other than the fact that they just don't care about being nice to people. And that's the main reason criminals are dangerous. They don't usually go to these like cult of assassins type things. They're just violent people, and that's why they can attack people and not feel bad about it or hesitate. The same is true for all this like Al-Qaeda type. Yeah, it's the same as like going to fight the British with your spear and your sword, you know, and they have machine guns and cannons and ironclads. You know, it's like even if the terrorists have assault rifles, so the soldiers will also have bulletproof vests, tanks, drones, battleships. You can't smuggle a battleship into Iraq, and I've never seen terrorists use a tank, you know, so good luck with that, you know. It's bringing a knife to a bomb fight. It's bringing a gun to a bomb fight, basically. So, it's like, well, a terrorist can sneak up on a railway, which is not likely nowadays, because of the security measures we have. Plant a bomb on a railroad and blow some stuff up. A military can basically bomb you from space. So it's still not a fair fight. They hype it up because they need to generate drama, but also so people are on their guard and get sloppy, which is one thing, like I said, barring incompetence. Lastly, I don't see how the military has such a hard time actually, I do see how the military has a hard time against terrorists. Main reason, they couldn't find the terrorists. They're so well hidden. But like I said, barring incompetence, you don't know. And I think you can't control other people. I mentioned earlier. I think people don't have to tell people they will or won't do something because they're gonna argue that, yeah, I just did. And it makes you sound like you think you're a fortune teller or like a reality warper, rather than somebody who just wants them to do something. And it doesn't make it happen. It doesn't make you sound more confident. It makes you sound arrogant. And like you, and people who really believe you will be confused. It doesn't happen. Lastly, on the whole war and terror thing, I mean, why didn't we see that coming? Like, I mean, Vietnam was the same way. Vietnam was the same way. And I think it's hilarious, really, how, like, the war on terror was, like, this whole, like, really poorly planned out, poorly timed, rushed endeavor, and yet it's still more expensive for us as a country to barely hold out in a war that we basically started. than the people who were sneaking around and not getting killed. Earlier I considered the possibility of going towards the Ku Klux Klan. Maybe that's why they're not doing it. Maybe there'll be yet another guerrilla insurgent blunder like Iraq or Vietnam, or heck, that matter, all the stuff in the colonial era was like that, you know. The Haitian Revolution, the British invasion of Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure actually that's one reason they don't do it, but again, with careful planning, we could probably take them down. I doubt it will be completely one-sided, but there are people obsessed about the military. I don't think a lot of plans work that well. Like, I think I've heard about I think a war on terrorism is hilarious. This is all the things they didn't have that an industrialized military, that a first world military should have, that basically puts them on even fight with terrorists. And they still thought it was going to be an easy fight. The other hilarious thing is that the terrorists actually, like, had, like, early on, we were winning until Bush invaded Iraq and Al-Qaeda in Iraq came around, and then it was chaos for, like, 4, maybe 8 years, and, like, until after for, like, the whole time in high school we were talking about the Iraq War. The hilarious thing, though, is, like, people want to talk, the other thing about that is, like, Bush and Obama were both heavily criticized. I remember all my liberal friends and I were always talking about Bush is an idiot, and we say Bush is an idiot, like, every damn day. And yet people still don't understand how, and just as a president, he will get criticized. Obama gets criticized, he would believe, and yet Bush was the same way. Like, people were all like, Bush is an idiot. Like, when he got elected, we were making fun of him in Mad Magazine, and then 9/11 happened, and he was reading to children, which I think the hilarious part of that is that he was completely unprepared for war. And lastly, I think the hilarious thing about Bush is that, like, he called it a crusade. He called the war in Iraq a crusade to destroy the axis of evil, which I think is a hilarious term because they were really an axis. Like, it wasn't this, like, unified thing. It was like a whole bunch of different organizations that were, it's like they're about as terrorist today is kind of like pirate in the 18th century. There's all kinds of people who do it, and they copy the ones who are successful, but it's not really a single organization. There's no leader of the whole thing. And that's the problem with the military strategy also, is like, who's the leader of the terrorists? Well, there's all kinds of leaders of terrorists. And it's like, the other thing that's hilarious about the war on terror, I think is hilarious, is that Bush basically sounds like an idiot every day. I'll post some of his quotes. Like, the other thing is, eventually, you know, I propose that they will accuse Hispanic immigrants, who they like to call aliens, which is absolutely hilarious. Like, they think Mexicans are from outer space. They eventually accuse Mexicans of being terrorists. they'll call it terrorism to come to America. The problem with that, though, why are they so afraid of Mexicans coming to our country? What are they doing wrong by coming here? It's just basically blatant racism, you know. It's like, the other thing is that Mexicans are officially the only brown people. Most people have brown skin. Arabs are also brown people. If I remember correctly, most of them have brown skin. But people say brown people instead of Mexicans or Latinos. It's kind of asinine. The other one is the whole the fact that Arabs and Mexicans look kind of similar. You know they do. The other thing is what we should totally do against we should totally have like a war on gays. It's getting pretty damn desperate, but basically I think the only reason people don't just go to a gay pride parade and punch every single one of them is because they're afraid of getting in trouble. And if there weren't, you could totally go to war with the gays, and I don't see why adding "the" to a group makes it offensive. They just try and cherry trouble, basically. It's the gays. Lastly, I think gay bashing I think would be fun. Would be the whole curing them. It is a mental disorder. There's no way around it. It's basically people who are capable of reproducing, but don't. And it's only possible to reproduce with heterosexual intercourse. Which proves it can't be genetic, because if you never have kids, your genes die with you. Also, there was a study that proves that if you have identical twins where one is gay and one is straight, in which case they have the same DNA, but so clearly they have a choice. Another thing they claim is that if it were a choice, no one would do it, and they all say exactly that. It's a rehearsed response. It is a choice, and they do it. Also, people are capable of doing something by choice, regardless of the consequences. Is it not a choice to do drugs because you know that you're gonna end up completely fucking up your biology and your brain? People do it by choice. And the other thing gays like to say is you can't tell who's gay by looking at them, listening to their voices, the way they dress, the way they move, the words they use. So if we can't tell who's gay, how do gays tell who's gay? Do they ever like talk to somebody who they think is gay who's actually straight? Like, that would be... But they do know. There's a way to tell, and it's a learned skill. The other thing they say is they're not really complaining. Oh, like hell they are. The other claim they make is that it's been in every culture ever. We don't know everything about world history, so you can't prove that. Lastly, the other one, but except the cultures they don't like. Like, if you say they were gay Nazis, they will deny it to the grave. The other claim they like to make is that, the other thing that cut down gays, though, is if the military had more strong women. Because, if the military weren't so afraid to have women in combat, if we had more, like, if there was more, feminism in the military, there'd be fewer homosexuals in the military, and it'd be easier to identify, and they would probably just give up. The other thing I'm worried about, where does the closet originate? Because clearly that meme had an origin, and yes, I would call it a meme, because the term meme was coined in the 70s, and there were... I figure, you know, somebody was literally hiding a closet in some erotic thriller, and I don't know, maybe masturbating in the closet, or just hiding at a party. I don't know. I would like to see a gay guy hiding in the closet. Literally. It would be hilarious, and everybody would know what it means. And, the other thing gays like to do is, wearing the mask. That's the term we used to use for hiding in the closet became popular. The other thing, there's maybe a new thing, which is, getting off of the fence. The fence is the new closet, because the fence is always the fence, not fence. And but the other hilarious thing they say is that people are looking for homophobic. I'm sorry, phobia is actual medical term. And if you talk to a therapist, gay bashers aren't afraid of you. You just wish they were, so you feel less afraid for your safety. And lastly, why would people be gay themselves and beat you up? Are you really that annoying? If you are, divide and conquer is likely ahead. And lastly, homosexuality really is a choice. At the end of the day, I know this one he's not bisexual, but he's gay and he has a girlfriend. I know you talk about like young guys and kissing a girl, but he's not bisexual. The big thing is people who talk about all the other thing that's another flavor of the month in those last 10 or so years. That nobody said, why everybody is bashing on anime. Partly it's that when you put yourself that prominently as they were at their turn of the millennium, you'll be a target for criticism because people want to see something else. Or because people just don't like you. But I remember when anime was more imaginative, artistic stuff. It was Studio Ghibli, it was also the series like Wings Upon Yami and Evangelion, and let's see some other lesser known ones. Maybe it's not a lesser known, but well, actually, like just so many great anime that were world building and political stuff and techno thrillers and mecha anime and all this dramatic stuff. And now it's mostly softcore porn, actual porn, over the top girliness, gay stuff, child porn, and occasionally they'll come up with another hardcore fighting anime like Dragon Ball Z. It was like the hardest part. It was like, comparable to what X-Men would have been like if they didn't have the comics code. No, maybe not, but it was the hardest of the hard. But now they mostly do all this bullshit that makes no sense. And it used to be, American cartoons were bullshit, you know? Until the time about maybe The Little Mermaid, American animation went through a long several decades spat of having terrible budgets, and people just didn't really care. There was some good stuff, but there's also a lot of crap, and now anime is going through that, and it's sad. Anime is dying. One art card a few years ago that just basically tries to make that point but fails miserably. Said that Power Rangers there's a real action, because I'm sorry, how do you find real action, and why did you not see it in a Batman the Animated Series, Gargoyles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, SWAT Cats Radical Squadron, fighting games, and but the other thing he claimed was that Power Rangers pretty much died in the Mighty Morphin era. Funny how, when I was reading this, it was almost Power Rangers been for almost 20 years, it hadn't pretty much died. It just wasn't constantly remarked upon by the mass media, and they had fans as opposed to. And the budget got steadily got bigger. The fighting got better, and still is. And from there, I took his argument that anime was dying to mean, oh no, we're no longer a gimmick that everybody cares about. And I was like gonna say, yeah, well, guess what? It's kind of like how in the 60s, spies were considered new and exotic. You could do any spy work, and people cared about it. And then eventually it became a standard trope in television writing, and people took it much further, and that's what I saw. So yeah, anime is pretty much dying. The other thing is, it's gone from this exotic, unique concept to being this unreal cliche, where when it's self-parody now. It's what happened to comic books now for a while. And yeah, it's kind of like 90s comics, and since that's all excess, it's all fucking bullshit that, and it's gonna be backlash. Just like, you know, in the 2000s, Marvel went from men who looked like the Incredible Hulk were only best strong as Captain America, wielding laser rifles that looked like something you put on a tank, to men who looked like football players with realistic guns fighting terrorists and doing better writing. That's gonna happen to anime, because it's gone from the whole sword inside your body being a novelty to being absurd. The fucked up thing about it is, like, do people really care anymore? I think the same is true for the whole LGBT. It's the increasing number of, like, gay lifestyles, because it's no longer shocking. The other thing that's hilarious is, people aren't trying to get anime out there anymore. It's pretty much dead. Like, in terms of why they're not trying that anymore? Because there's so few good anime. The other reason, you can watch it online. And lastly, because the fans are obsessives. If you're going to be a fan, just realize most people watching this are not nitpicking experts. They don't care. Lastly, when you say the series is dead, please explain why it's so terrible when 10-year-old boys don't really care that you have a problem with. The prequel trilogy, for example, granted it wasn't that good, but it wasn't nearly as bad as people say it was. Same with Rob Liefeld's art. You know, because he can't draw. Yes, he can. It's not like he's drawing chicken scratch. It's pretty realistic art. You just don't like what he's drawing, and you don't like his politics, and you like to draw whatever new obligation to bash someone is. But granted, there are a lot of better artists, but again, there are worse artists. Much like the Star Wars prequels could have been considered the worst movie ever, unless you realize that most kids movies now are even stupider, and they're giggly. The other thing that's hilarious that people say is like, these are ruined forever. I don't know. One day you're gonna be able to see it again. Just wait and maybe give the people in charge some feedback. With the other one, I do think Catwoman killed the Matrix style fight choreography, because it was the last movie I saw for a long time, that kind of fighting, and it was a flop, and they stopped doing that in movies for several years. I don't think they're doing it again. So yeah, Catwoman killed Bullet Time. It was already a cliche by 2001. If you looked at the trailer for Shrek. However, again, nothing is gone forever. Someone might make a movie with that kind of special effects and do really well. A hilarious thing, though, the most hilarious thing that is ruined forever is,
Are you talking to yourself?
making a movie.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I'll say hi.
Hi. I let people do this because I'm a nice person, and hey, why not?
Good job.
Thanks. Lastly, the thing that's hilarious of the whole, was ruined forever was, this is never good to begin with, My Little Pony. I'm sorry, My Little Pony is for little girls. It's for preschoolers, preschool girls, maybe first grade girls. It was never intended for grown men. No matter how good it is, please don't tell me you like My Little Pony if you're a grown man. Because it makes you sound like, even for people who watch cartoons as adults, that will still laugh at you if you say you like My Little Pony. Lastly, the whole, however, the thing I like most about the whole, like, brony thing, it's hilarious about it, is that My Little Pony is dead. There's the whole...
Can you keep it down a little bit in the library, okay?
Sure. It's the whole Rainbow Dash thing. I should probably end it here. I'm getting nowhere.